Hi, and welcome to Designed for Life, the podcast that brings design and technology teachers and business leaders from across the UK together as we collectively seek to inspire, energize, and create the workforce of the future.
Hi, and welcome back to 2021 and Designed for Life, the podcast brought to you by the Design and Technology Association. My name's Tony Ryan. I'm the Chief Executive of the Design and Technology Association, and it's my pleasure to run these podcasts. Before we kick off season 2, just a few bits and pieces that I really would like to go through. First of all, the reasons we started the podcast. We're now 8 podcasts in, which is amazing. It's just flown by. And we started this really with the view of there's an awful lot of good stuff going on in schools that people don't hear about, and there's some fantastic stuff going on out there in industry that not enough people hear about and students can benefit from. And what we wanted to do is what we're about at the association partly is joining those two sectors up and hopefully allowing conversations to feed both ways. And the feedback that we've got seems to be saying that we're doing that quite successfully at the moment. So thank you to everybody who's listening into us. Thank you to those of you that have fed back and given us some thoughts, observations, and ideas for future podcasts so far. Some good news is following our first 8 episodes, the Edge Foundation, who provided sponsorship to start this venture off in the first place, are staying with us for 2021, which I'm absolutely delighted with. The two organisations, the Design and Technology Association and the Edge Foundation, are very, very aligned in the way that we think, and it's a perfect match, really. So thank you to everybody at Edge for your continued support and for sticking with us into 2021. So first of all, some things that I'd like to ask for. I want this to be a conversation. So if you've got some people that you think, well, they would be great on there and that topic would be brilliant, but I haven't got anybody in mind, please let us know. A few ways of getting in touch with us. First of all, you can do it via email, which is at designedforlife@data.org.uk. You can contact me, DesTechRyan, at DesTechRyan on Twitter. And they're probably the two easiest ways to get in contact straight away. So if you have got any thoughts as to topics that you feel would be useful or people that you feel that we should be interviewing on Design for Life, please let us know. We're going to open up a YouTube channel as well, which we've been working on. That's going to open fairly soon. And we're also going to have a dedicated section on our website for the podcast with extra bits and pieces that come out from the podcast, which will be there and downloadable from there. I'll let you know about that as soon as that becomes live. We're also toying with the idea of doing some dedicated podcasts, which would feed into both GCSE and A-level revision work and discussion work for students. If there are topics that you feel would fit that perfectly, then again, please let us know. If you drop us a line, just let us know what topics you feel would be beneficial, and we'll gather them together and we'll try and create some there, and we'll create some podcasts which are aimed specifically at students. It's one of the joys of the feedback is that I know more and more students every month are tapping into this podcast, which is fantastic. But we aim to do some specifically for GCSE and A-level design and technology students. So on to season 2, and the first episode of season 2 involves Paul Pentelow and Laura Wood from a company called Invisible Creations. Invisible Creations were pieced together just a year ago in order to tackle the issue that design for the elderly tended to be functional, tended to do a job, but aesthetically wasn't very good. And as such was being avoided by people that really fiercely guard their independence. The idea was, and the slogan really that runs across the company is design with dignity. So without further ado, let's meet Paul and Laura from Invisible Creations. I'm here today with Laura Wood and Paul Pentelow, co-founders of Invisible Creations. Hi, Paul. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Tony.
Hi, Tony.
Right, what we're going to do is just as an introduction, first of all, if I start with you, Paul, can you tell us a little about yourself? Just give us a role. What do you do at Invisible Creations and a little bit about Invisible Creations themselves?
Yeah, so Invisible Creations were born out of the housing association space. So myself and Laura have got a background in housing associations. So we've worked in there for 6 years. And we were put together by the industry body of the housing association sector in England, which is the National Housing Federation. And they put together a bit of an innovation project in which they would look at some of the bigger challenges associated with the housing sector. One of those was aging and how people age in their homes, really getting down to the bottom of some of those challenges for people, what people face every day. So myself and Laura, along with some of the housing association professionals, were kind of decamped down to Leeds for 60 weeks, in which we were free to explore the challenges that people face as an aging population. On the back of that, we created an idea and we went through that space, and I'm sure we'll touch on that as we go. But ultimately, we came up with the concept of Invisible Creations, and we've been on that journey ever since around September 2018. So now the business is up and running and we're trading, and my role is the head of product design at Invisible Creations. So it's my job to make sure that we have the right resource in terms of designers, external partners, and that we can develop great product from some of the challenges that we see and observe from our customer base.
Cool, thank you. And Laura, your background is English sociology at university, and then you were a teacher at one stage.
Yeah, so in a former life, I was an English teacher, GCSE and A-level, and then kind of transgressed into PR and communications and for a social housing firm, and then moved across to Invisible Creations this year. Because Paul and I had so much passion for the work that we'd done in the kind of social incubator to create Invisible Creations, both of us were so keen to kind of see it through to be a business and to help change so many people's lives. We kind of took the risk to leave our very steady, stable, permanent jobs to move over to a startup business to kind of just make this a reality, really.
Cool. And your role within Invisible Creations very much on the marketing, on the communication side of things?
Yeah, so I'm the marketing director for Invisible Creations, kind of responsible for profile, reputation, brand, help with the kind of sales avenue of the business. So it's really just to get the kind of brand message out there about who we are, what we do, and what products we offer.
I'm going to come back to that later on, because I think you've got a pretty good niche on what you're doing now. So that messaging, I think, is really important part of what you do. With all the podcasts, and I think with all of us, it's a journey. And I think when you're 16 or 15 or whatever it might be, my daughter's 15 at the moment, and she's tormenting herself. Is like, what am I going to do as a career? And I'm trying to say to her, look, chill. It's going to come. It'll find you. Just do well at school. Do what you can, and it will find you. Because I wouldn't have thought in a million years that I'll be doing what I'm doing now. This definitely wasn't a plan. So with all of our guests, I'll try and take you back to school, to what your experience at school was, and then, how has it evolved into what you're doing now? So Laura, can I start with you? I mean, how was school for you?
So for me, I really enjoyed school, but it was because like English, I've been always really passionate about, loved reading, writing, kind of giving presentations, stuff like that when I was younger. So for me, I always knew I was going to kind of follow that creative path of doing something within the kind of English area. And I think I struggled when I got to the point of university, because I'd always followed English because it was something I'd enjoyed. And then it was like, how do I get a job out of this? Like, where do I actually go? And the most obvious one was, oh, well, if you're really good at English, become an English teacher. And that's what I fell into without really thinking about, is this what I want to do? Am I even passionate about this? Which turns out I wasn't all that much. So at me, kind of, 25, 26, took the leap to say, actually, teaching's not what I want to do. I want to kind of explore other options. Was kind of a bold risk at that point, because I completely just left teaching without another job in sight. I just left and said, something better will come along. Happiness is more important for me. But I think I'd always kind of looked for something that I was passionate about, and I've always followed my passion. And I think it doesn't matter if you don't have a plan. If you don't have kind of that road mapped out from school to say, this is the career that I want to do for the rest of my life, I think as long as you follow what your passions are, and that's kind of led me to the job that I have now, because never in a million years did I think that I would be super passionate about aging, about kind of making sure that we transform people's lives through all walks of life. And actually here I am at 32, super passionate about making sure that, people in their 80s are getting exactly the kind of products and services that they deserve, regardless of what age you are. It shouldn't restrict the things that you have access to, really. So yeah, I've had quite a kind of unique journey, I guess, from school to now. It's not really been a very planned or structured kind of path. It has just been a point in time where I've just followed where my passions lie. And actually it's been really fruitful, because I think the more you care about what you do, the more you enjoy the job, the more you get out of it, and the bigger difference that you make.
I absolutely agree. I mean, I fell into teaching, and my story sort of the other way around. I was a car mechanic, wanted a degree, thought I'll get a degree and then I'll rush back into industry. And the first time I stood in front of a group of kids, I just thought, nah, this is what I was meant to do. And 33 years later, I'm still in education. So you find what you as you say, what flicks your switch, and if it flicks your switch, it works. Paul, what about you? What about you back at school? Was there a plan?
No, not at all. And to be honest, myself and Laura have never really discussed this before, but I echo the path that Laura's taken, because for me, school was absolutely brilliant, and I loved what I loved. And if I didn't like it, I didn't do so well, and it didn't really hold my concentration or focus. So I very much focused on what I enjoyed doing, which was sport at that age. I had absolutely no career path at that point. Naturally went into sports science through college, sport management into university. But at that point, and to be honest, up until I was about 25, I didn't really know what I was wanting to do, what I intended to do. I went through various different roles, as myself and Laura have joked about in the past. Ended up in banking for a lot of years, and realised that at 25, this is just not something I want to do anymore. It's not something that kind of satisfies what I want to do and what I strive to do in terms of helping people. So heard about social housing and the benefits that can have on people, and giving back to society and all of that good stuff. And it was just a natural, organic role that I took up that really made me feel good about myself. And taking that into Invisible Creations and the opportunity we had to make people's lives better is absolutely at the heart, and is a really big value for me. So yeah, you can always pick up the skills and the knowledge as you go. Like I said, there's never really been a plan for me. I've just followed my heart, followed my head, and just kind of developed as and when. I think it's very important to be true to yourself and make sure that you do what you want to do, and hopefully that benefits other people as well.
And that learning never stops, eh? There's a danger at school that we tell kids that, you do this and then you go to university and then you go to work, and it's like they're three separate things.
Yeah.
But I'm 57 now, and, if anyone had told me that I'd have to find my way into making podcasts, I'd have thought they were nuts. But, you learn what you need to learn at the time, eh?
Absolutely. And we have a little bit of a mantra within Invisible Creations that we never stop learning, lifetime learning. We're always reevaluating what we've learned and how it's progressed, and maybe things have changed. And that goes all the way back into the design and into the product as well. So yeah, it's important that we continue to grow and develop as individuals and as a business to ensure that we are making the most of what we're trying to do, and the value that provides.
So you both ended up working in the social housing sector, and that has indirectly led to what you're doing there today. What are the bits that you both picked up in working in social housing that perhaps flicked the switches that, banking or teaching didn't flick? What was it about social housing that made you think, yeah, I like this. This is something that I want to get up and do in the mornings? Laura, can I start with you?
Yeah, I think for me, I hadn't really heard that much about social housing before I started working in it. I think it's one of those kind of mystery areas that people don't really know that much about. And actually, once you get in it, you realise there is so many different career opportunities within it. And actually, there's so many huge differences that you can make to people's lives throughout. It's not just about housing. The kind of magnitude of different things that social housing providers do for the communities is crazy. They kind of support people through all walks of life, whether that's housing, whether that's employment, education, training. So for me, once I've kind of started working within social housing, I was totally hooked, because there were so many opportunities to really make a difference. And then that's when I realised, for me, this is what I want to do with my life and my career, is work within a job within an organisation that has the power and the potential to change people's lives for the better. So that's kind of one of the biggest drivers for me. And it was a hard decision to leave social housing, because I loved the kind of work that we did. And with me working in PR and comms, I had the great opportunity to span the whole business and to find those really positive stories to kind of promote and say, look at what these businesses are doing and look at how they're transforming people's lives. And it would take something really, really fantastic to come along and get me away from social housing, and Invisible Creations was that thing.
It was the draw. And Paul, yourself, I mean, to go from sports science to social housing is quite a jump.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's just all about, giving back and that sense of helping people. Housing associations aren't specifically aimed at the most vulnerable in our community, but they certainly serve that area. So to give back and to help and to make sure that people are living healthy lives, that they are doing the best they can, they're giving the best possible opportunities, that's just something I really value and want to take forward as a person. So for me, that was the draw for me. That was my hook, was that it's all about giving back. It's all about making sure people are living healthy, happy lives. And it just so happens that as I developed as an individual within the housing association, that opportunities did come my way. And absolutely a mantra of mine as well is to, if you see an opportunity, absolutely go for it. Make the most of those opportunities because they don't always come around.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's seeing them. It's seeing it because they go past quite quickly unless you grab them, don't they? So in 2019, you had the opportunity, both of you, to investigate and then create Invisible Creations. Can you tell me a little bit about how that opportunity came up? As you said, I think at the start, Laura, it's just drawn you away from somewhere where you had a salary, you had security, and it's dragging you into the unknown in a way where you've got to take that leap of faith. And what I'm interested to explore when you answer this is, how difficult is that leap of faith? Because with many kids, they're told at school by the careers advisor, if you do this career, this is what you learn. And what I'm hearing from both of you guys is that, yeah, you need enough to pay the bills, you need enough to live your life, but actually making a difference is just as valuable.
Yeah, so I guess it's probably worth talking about the kind of social incubator program that we were part of. So the social housing sector decided to run this social innovation program, and it was aimed at tackling some of the biggest issues that the housing sector faces across the UK. And it was kind of challenged. There was different groups across the country that came together to look at these issues, and one of them being around the ageing population. How do we support people to live well, independently in their homes for longer was the challenge that we were given. And we were thrown together as kind of 6 people from different organisations we'd never met before. We were given a challenge that we knew nothing about. We were from completely different backgrounds, completely different careers. So it was a huge challenge to just kind of come together as a group and look at something that was really unfamiliar to us. But actually that really worked in our favour because we all were coming at it from completely different perspectives and all kind of from fresh eyes. We weren't people that had been working in design and ageing for a really long time. We could actually come in and shake things up a little bit. So we kind of spent that 16 weeks together, and it was really difficult. It was really challenging because we wanted to save the whole world, the whole ageing population. We wanted to come up with like 100 different ideas that would solve every problem going, and quickly realised that there was no way that we could do that, even if we'd had 16 years, never mind 16 weeks. So we really had to drill down to kind of what were the key issues that we can actually try and solve here and now. And I think part of, it was really challenging, it was really difficult, but it was also really exciting. It was really engaging. It was something that, we were taking risks, we were doing something completely outside of our comfort zone. But I think that was kind of where, everyone says that's where the magic happens. And for us, that was true. So we had that kind of really, really tight time frame to come up with an idea. And, it was pressure because we were getting told at the end of this 16 weeks, you have to pitch your idea to 800 sector leaders in this kind of Dragon's Den environment. And you've got this very short time frame, and it's got to be an idea to change the world.
And this is a pass or fail scenario, is it? I mean, you pitch it, and if they don't like the idea, it's thanks very much. You've done your 16 weeks. Goodbye.
So it was kind of framed as it was always going to be a 16-week program. And I think they were hoping that they'd get some good ideas that they could then roll out to the whole kind of social housing sector across the UK. But it was kind of like you do the 16 weeks and then you go back to your job at the end of it. So it was always just pitched as this kind of one thing. Then you'd come up with an idea, you'd let it kind of float away, and it would be someone else's thing to pick up afterwards. And I guess it wasn't necessarily a pass or fail, but it was a huge reputational risk to go up on a stage in front of 800 people with an idea that potentially could be terrible. So, you know, they were putting a lot of faith in us because our organisations had let us out of the business for a really long time. For that 4-month period, they were kind of saying, we want something good to come back at the end of this. We haven't kind of let you go off for this time to come back with a rubbish idea. So there was a lot of pressure around it, but I think the way they framed it in a tight time frame where you knew you had to deliver, you knew you had sprints to work through, and you had to have certain ideas to test and to move on, that kind of really helped because it gave you that drive to say, okay, we know we need to hit this point.
You couldn't pontificate on detail. You couldn't stick on one little bit for 3 weeks because you just didn't have time to do that.
Yeah, that's it. There was such a tight time frame attached to it that you had to deliver. You had to, you know, by a certain point, if the idea was good, then move with it. If it wasn't going anywhere, then throw it in the bin and move on. It was that kind of like, you know, you've got to make a decision here and now as to whether you're going to run with this idea or not, because you had to deliver the goods at the end of it. You had to get on that stage and come up with something. And Paul will probably talk through a bit more about like that design process that we went through and the sprints and how we actually kind of came up with the kind of concepts. But in terms of the kind of program itself, it was designed to kind of get to the end of it and for it to be like, right, you know, we've come up with some really great ideas. The sector as social housing is really innovative. Look at the kind of young, vibrant people that we've got coming up with ideas to help change the world. But we came up with something that potentially is so life-changing that when we got to the end of it and we're supposed to go back to the day jobs, Paul and I were like, that's not going to happen. We've got something really, really great here. We need to carry on with this. We need to make it reality. So we fought tooth and nail to stay on the project, to lengthen it so that we could get the support that we needed to turn it into a business. And it took 2 years to get there, but it was well worth the long hours and the challenges and the kind of tough days and the tears that we had to get to a point now where we've got a business that, you know, is life-changing.
Yeah. I mean, Paul, if I come to you that in that 16 weeks, this is something that students will do when they're doing the NEA, which is the assessment bit that they've got to make and design and everything, is that students will sometimes fixate on one little bit and will spend too much time on that as opposed to moving on. You said there, Laura, we found out what worked and we went with that, and we found out what didn't work. Paul, how do you know what's working and what's not working? How do you test that?
What I would say is that when we started the sprint and when we started the process itself, we threw ourselves into the research. So sprint 1 was all about getting to grips with the problem. And what does that mean? So we had a pretty open brief, to be honest. How do we ensure people live well in their homes for longer? That could take any form whatsoever. So we literally spoke to anyone we could, anyone in that aging area who would be able to contribute and help us understand what some of those challenges are. So we literally went to Age UK coffee mornings in the centre of Leeds. We went to residents groups. We spoke to housing professionals, falls prevention officers, policemen who deal with the crime in the area in terms of age relation and all of that kind of discrimination stuff. We went to academics. We read so many studies. I've got a bibliography the length of my arm that we went through. And I think that was our foundation to build upon, our understanding that there are so many challenges, and we mapped them out as to what they are, and then really thought and got down to how we would intervene at those points. What could we create to ensure that we are solving this problem for people? And as Laura said earlier in the conversation, we wanted to try and solve absolutely everything. We wanted one idea that satisfied everything. And we realized that just wasn't going to happen. That was just totally beyond our grasp, and we needed to really bring it back. So we had a very honest conversation when we realized that. Part of the team dynamic was that we really had a great resilience, that we went straight on to the next thing. We just dropped what we had, went back to the drawing board and thought, right, we need a more simple solution. We need to focus on one element. So we went back and looked through all of that research again, reevaluated, and realised that grab rails, aids and adaptations, minor adaptations are absolutely key in keeping people mobile and independent in their homes for longer, which is what the brief was about. But we realised that there was some design flaws, or what was currently out there wasn't particularly designed well for people in terms of the aesthetic and how it makes people feel. It's more functional. So a byproduct of that is people would only have these things installed because they have had a fall or they've had a health issue, and they wouldn't really want them when they have them. And it makes people feel vulnerable. It makes people feel like they're bringing the hospital into the home. It just has this really negative connotation just on the way something's designed. So that's what again really hooked us in is that we can do better than this. We can design better, and we know how we can do that. We might not know what it looks like, but we know there's something in that. We want something that's more preventative rather than reactionary. We want something that actually solves the problem before it starts. And that's where we started thinking about the aesthetics and how it looks and how things are designed whilst keeping that function. So being quite broad and having that, I picture it as a funnel. You literally throw in everything at the top and you funnel that down to one neat solution. It's certainly great to start with a very broad view of the problem and really narrow that down and think about how you can make a simple solution for something that maybe is a really difficult challenge.
So I think most people will have somebody in their family or friends or whatever who are in the situation that you are describing. And if I go back, my mum, 87 now, she's in a home now because she's got Alzheimer's. She got to a point where she couldn't be independent. But up till the age of 83, she was fiercely independent. There was no way she was going to go into a home, and also the thing that stuck in my mind when I read everything about what you're doing is that she said to me just last month, I passed myself in the mirror and I looked in the mirror and I thought, who's that old dear looking back at me? Because in her head, she's still 18. And that's where I am at 57. I'm still 18. And it's just that, your body tells you sometimes that's not the case, but it's helping people to keep that independence. So let's touch on the products that you're designing. What are these products and how do they help that independence?
So yeah, we had the idea or the concept that we want to design better. We saw what was out there. We saw it was very medicalized, clinical, ugly, depressing. And we thought, yeah, we can absolutely do better. What does that look like? And we went through a series of iterations of what that potentially could look like. We thought about making things better quality or taking grab rails and maybe personalizing them or maybe it's a chrome finish or whatever that might look like. And we pitched that to a little bit of a steering group that we'd arranged. And we realized really quickly that making grab rails look pretty isn't good enough. There's still that stigma attached. It still reminds people of mobility lost or independence lost, rather than giving them a springboard to actually stay independent. So we thought, well, what can we do to ensure that we're hitting that challenge and that we are really solving the problem? And a couple of things came together. The first was that we saw elements of universal design and our eyes were opened up to that concept. So I always think about the original Ford Focus and the story behind that, in that it was created by the designers using empathy suits, things that gave the impression of being an older person, maybe having sight difficulties, restrictions in their joints, and how they interact with that particular vehicle, and designed around that. We thought we could apply that to the grab rails that are currently out there. So we wanted to make sure that they are universal in terms of their use. And the second point was that steering group that said, actually, you can't just pretty something up. You can't just stick a ribbon on it and expect people to really take that up as a preventative measure. So we looked at duality of purpose. And I think that was the moment for us that we thought, actually, we've hit on something here. If we can give a grab rail another purpose, it removes that stigma entirely. So we have put together a series of products that have that duality of purpose whilst also having that support function. So when design and function collide, really. The first one is the external flower pot. So we realized that getting in and out of the house is critical for socializing and for, just generally being independent. And believe it or not, there's bungalows out there that have steps going into the property. And that's a really big challenge. And it can be the difference between life and death, really, and remaining healthy or not. So we thought, well, we can't just stick grab rails on the outside. So we included a flower pot and built that into the product itself. We've got a grab rail element to that, which we've curved it so that it doesn't look like a traditional bog standard grab rail. And we wanted to make sure that at first glance, if you look at it, you wouldn't say there's any vulnerability or any disability. And we tested that with our steering group as well as with end users and with some surveys as well. And that's been a really big hit for us. We always knew it was a pretty good idea, but that's the one that really stands out. And we've had a lot of really great feedback on that. It's something that people have never seen before.
That's outside the house. So that's a statement before you've even approached the house that an elderly person lives in this property.
Yeah, we toyed with the phrase vulnerability indicators. It really came out of the conversation with the police in Leeds. People who are up to no good would target those properties with grab rails outside because they know there's a vulnerable person inside. Same goes for key safes. They know there's a vulnerable person inside that property. So it might be worth taking that opportunity to see if there's something that can be done. So we realised that there's a safety issue there in terms of the way it looks, but also the way people feel about their homes. You know, it's their home. They've lived in that home for years. They've got lots of memories attached. They don't want to stick scaffolding poles on the outside of properties. What does that say about you as a person? So we thought we've got to do something on the external. And then that kind of led us to the bathroom. So a lot of the research was saying that people who are vulnerable and have a loss of mobility, they see the bathroom as a risky place. So a byproduct of that is they will reduce the amount of food and water they intake through the day to lessen the amount of trips they take to the bathroom. That obviously leads to dehydration, and dehydration and a loss of mobility result in a fall. That can lead to really dangerous consequences and really puts people at risk. So we thought we need to tackle a bathroom. And what that meant was we saw people were using items within the bathroom itself to steady themselves as they went through their various activities. So people would hold onto the pedestal of a basin while they brushed their teeth, or while they had a shave. And we thought, well, actually, what if we had a mirror in front of or above the pedestal itself, and a grab rail incorporated with a shelf so that someone can grab onto that and steady themselves. And it's something that's fit for purpose and actually de-risks that element for the end user. And we also looked at getting on and off the toilet. That transfer can be really difficult as we age. So it's something that has duality of purpose in terms of adding a toilet roll to it. And it's something that can be done as a preventative measure. So these products are for people who are maybe undiagnosed and starting to see those mobility issues, but they're unaddressed. And those products are already there in the property to increase the lifespan of the mobility and the activities people have. We also saw the shower as a really risky place as well. I mean, everyone slept in the shower, no matter who you are. That's not an age thing at all. That's just a generalization, really. So we put together a corner shower shelf to store products. And again, it's something that's fit for purpose, something you can grab onto to steady yourself. It just helps people and stops people from falling and really makes a difference to people.
You're listening to Designed for Life. This podcast has been made possible through the support of our friends at the Edge Foundation, helping all young people to achieve their potential.
Laura, on your LinkedIn profile, and I think it's on the website as well, on your website, your grand Sheila, you roped her into playing a part as end user. Can you just talk us through that?
Yeah, she's played a huge part through everything that we've done. So she actually was a bit of an inspiration at the beginning, because when we were looking for people to talk to about what are the issues that older people face, who are the easiest people to kind of reach out to? It's friends and family. So she was kind of like the stereotypical kind of, should have been 85, 86 at the time, who very trendy, proud, classy lady, didn't want to compromise any of her standards, didn't want to compromise her dignity by kind of accepting that she needed help and that she needed support items around the house. And half of it was because of the way that they look. And we always say that people care about the way that things look because it impacts the way that they feel. And that's kind of was so true for her, is that she was rejecting getting any of these bits of equipment around the house that would support her, because for her, it was a huge kind of acceptance of, I'm old, I'm vulnerable, I need help, I'm not independent, I can't do what I used to be able to do. It was just labels all around the house that she was just like refusing to have. And it's a really common issue. I was experiencing it firsthand with her, but actually millions of people across the country and globally actually are kind of in that denial phase, but with good reason, because the products that they have available to them are horrible. They're clinical, they're medicalized, they do just look cheap and nasty.
Can I touch on that? Because it struck me that they are horrible and they are medical looking. They're functional only, and very little thought's gone into aesthetically how they look. But there's a market there that's well established, I would imagine, that you've now got to disrupt. And you must have stood on the edge of that market at some stage and thought, this is there, it fulfills a function and people aren't questioning it. So I'm going to go in questioning that market now, and that ain't going to be easy. It must have been something you talked through.
Yeah, we got asked a lot, and we still do, to be honest, why has no one done this before? And sometimes that can be a clear indication for, well, there's a reason why, don't try and do it. But for us, it was actually no one's done this before, because there's a market that's established that's cheap. And it's always been about money and about that there's a need. So actually there's a need that's being fulfilled here and it's really cheap, so no one's going to question it. And I think because it's been built for an older generation that's very different to ours, there's been an acceptance there that, okay, this is all that's on offer. I'm going to take it because I don't have any other choice. Whereas I think we have an attitude where we're saying, I'm not going to accept that. That's not good enough. And that was kind of true for my grandma, really. She didn't want the stuff, but it got to a point where she'd had a fall and she had no choice. So it was that acceptance of this is all that's available. So, okay, I'm going to have to take it. Whereas I think we came in and said, that's not good enough. My gran is now in a position where she feels more vulnerable because she's got this rail on the outside of a house that makes her feel less safe, even though it's a rail that's supposed to help her safety. The kind of irony in that piece is insane. So for us, it was kind of like, we know that this is going to be an uphill battle to try and change the perceptions of a huge market that already exists. But it's one that isn't just about physical health, it's about mental health. And for us, the difference that can make to how a person feels is just as important as it is to how it physically enables them as well.
I think we've always been really bold in that messaging that we've had. So on our big Dragon's Den pitch at the conference in 2018, we really spelled out the problem, and we stood up in front of 700 business leaders, chief execs, directors in social housing, and basically said, this isn't good enough. You are disabling your tenants by the properties and the products that you provide. And this needs to change. And this can really have a devastating impact on your tenants and how they live their lives, whether they age healthily or they don't. So we've always been really bold, and we make no bones about that. We realized we were disrupting a market that was very cost driven and very budget driven. And we still challenge that to this very day. And we have seen a lot of change already in a very short period of time. And people are seeing the benefits of great quality products that are aesthetically pleasing as well as functional. And people are changing their attitude, and they see a really big business benefit to them. So we try and map that out as best we can, but we can only take people so far. But we can spell out and we can say, if you invest this money in better products, better quality products that have all of these really healthy impacts and outcomes, then you can save in the long run. And that's all about sustaining tenancies and keeping people in their homes longer. As a landlord, of course, that's your objective. You want your properties to be tenanted as long as possible. But it's also about the cost of the property and when a property becomes empty and the void costs, as well as refurbishment and the like. These typical grab rails that are currently out there are being ripped out left, right and centre when somebody leaves that property, and they're being tossed away and they're not being recycled. Whereas our products are different. Ours have got longevity. The materials that we've used ensure that they've got a 25 plus year lifespan. They've got duality of purpose. So if somebody doesn't need that for the function of supporting them, you don't need to remove it for another family or another tenant, because there's still purpose within that product. So people are coming around to that, but we knew from day one that it was always going to take a little bit of disruption to get us there.
I mean, you've been very upfront with that on your website. I mean, I'm going to quote from your website now. Older people have been poorly served for too long with products that are stigmatizing, clinical and downright ugly. We're here to end that. I mean, you couldn't say it clearer than that. Now, I'm going to take you to the next bit now, because, you found a niche. You found a market that you feel you can design for. And designing is one thing and making is another. So you've just said you want this to have longevity in this design. You want it to be there probably past the person that you're installing it for, that it's going to stay in the home longer than that. How do you make that move from design to manufacture? How difficult is that move?
It's been very difficult. We recognize that we don't necessarily have the skills or knowledge within the business at the moment. To be fair, we probably didn't have design within the business, but we've gone past that and we've developed as an organization. But we had a really great partner. So North Product Design are based in Manchester, and they helped us with our early incarnations of the product. And they helped us on our journey to understanding what manufacturing looks like. So we've gone on a journey with them, but we've also followed our own path as well. So we've gone to different UK manufacturers. We've gone to various places to really understand what manufacturing means and how we can develop our products and what they look like. So the good thing about North Product Design is they've got a proven track record of developing product and manufacturing product with their partners. And the best piece of advice I could say from Nathan at North Product Design is that you need to design a Rolls Royce and you need to stick to that as much as possible. So we always thought about our products as being really high quality, really great materials that we used, longevity. We didn't want to try and basically come down to a really low cost solution. We didn't feel there was any value in that. We got burned a couple of times looking to do that with some manufacturers who were quite keen on keeping the costs as low as possible. But that just didn't work for us. We were making compromises left, right, and centre, and it really didn't fit right. It didn't sit well with us to try and do that. So we've tried to make sure that we are maybe a little bit more expensive than competitors, but there's really great value in that. And it's a bit of a differentiator in itself. So yeah, that journey has been tricky. We've tried not to make too many compromises in our vision. And actually getting that over the line has probably taken us about 18 months from that understanding and that conversation piece around this is what the design is. What does that look like? Can you achieve that? And how can you achieve that? So naturally, we've had conversations around tooling, around capability. Where can we get this capability, this component parts in terms of the polycarbonate that we use in the shelves themselves? Where do we source that? It's really big challenges that we've had, and it has been a long journey, but we're there in the end. I think our passion really shines through it in terms of what we're trying to deliver, and I think that always wins. I don't think we would be here today having this conversation without it, really. So I think if you believe in it enough, you will get there and you will overcome those challenges.
It stands out in this conversation and it stands out on your website. Before I met you, I had a good scout around the website, and the website really does shout the energy that you've got and the passion that you've got for it. Laurie, this is your bag, as it were, really is. You know, what Paul's saying there is that you've got a product that's probably going to be a little bit more expensive than the other products that are on the market, but you've got to convince people that this is a better product because. How do you do that?
Yeah, I think one of the things, we've learned along the way is it's not enough to just have a really good design, a really good product. You've really got to make sure that you have a very, very good story behind it as well. And I think that's what we've managed to build in the last 2 years is that, there's billions of people out there. Don't use a persona, use a real person, because that's what people will relate to. And that's what actually makes the biggest difference. And for us, we've had Sheila as the poster girl because it has made a real difference to her life. And we've been able to document that. And she's got so much pleasure from that personally as well. But I think that the message that we had with that is that everyone's got a Sheila. Everyone has a parent or a grandparent or a neighbour or a friend that is going through similar issues. And actually, this is a bigger issue than most people would ever give credit for. So I think that's kind of worked in our favour, is that we've managed to tell a story that's a real story that has real impact and that shows that the real benefits that something like this can make. And I think the other key to the success is building kind of relationships and collaboration. Again, you can have a really good product, but actually if you don't foster those really great relationships to help support what you're doing, you're probably not going to get that far. And we've actually managed to kind of take this to 10 Downing Street twice because of the kind of story and the journey that we were able to map out. We got given about 30 seconds to pitch it to the Prime Minister back in 2019. And because it's such a simple concept, we managed to get that over very quickly. And we were then invited to Downing Street to present and to do a workshop on what we'd achieved and what we were hoping to achieve further. And that kind of opened loads of doors for us because it put us in touch with expert leaders across a range of different areas, academics, experts in ageing, charities, from government, to kind of say, actually, the concept that you've got here, the products that you've got, this could really make a big difference. How can we help support that? And so I think it's one thing to have a great product, but the next thing is really being able to kind of sell why it is such a great product, what difference it's going to make, and how people can kind of get involved and support that.
Your passion's got to become somebody else's passion somehow. You've got to transfer that, and that's the trick. And I love what you said there. There's a story behind it, and people love a story, don't they? People will buy into a story. They won't buy into an organization in as much as they'll buy into a personal story. So, these are tricky times, and, the whole COVID thing and everything else is hitting everybody, and manufacturing and design is being hit really hard across the country, but you're growing at the moment and you're fighting your way through this. What's the next set of products that are going to come out of Invisible Creations? Because obviously, as soon as you've got one to market, you've got to have another one on the back burner. So what's coming next?
Yeah, absolutely. That's our focus. We want to develop new products. We have used COVID quite well, actually. It's given us a bit of breathing time and a bit of thinking time to think about what those products are and how we go about collaborating and how we go about getting those to market. So all in all, we've probably taken about 18 months, 2 years to set up the business, and our focus has been on that. How do we manufacture? What does the vehicle look like? How do we get the investment? All of those kind of big business questions that we need to answer. And luckily, we've got some really great sponsors that are actually from the housing sector. So we've got Anchor Hanover, we've got Carbon Homes, and we've got Johnny Johnson, who really help us in terms of pushing us towards the right areas and keep us in check. So yeah, going back to the designs, we are now in a phase where we're collaborating. We're thinking about what that unique product is that currently isn't out there in the market. We know that we have looked at the bathroom, we have looked at the external, and people are pushing us towards they want something different for the external because it might not necessarily suit every property type. So there's some challenges already identified through that we can overcome. So we've started that in earnest. We want to make sure that we allow people to get in and out of the property because that is a huge challenge for people if there's not an appropriate solution. We want to make sure that we're delivering a whole bathroom solution as well. So that might not necessarily be all of our own products. So as Laura's mentioned, we've got some really great partners who will be able to help us to deliver an accessible bathroom that's universal for everybody and that does not scream disability or vulnerability. And we think there's really great value in doing that. There's also value in it transitioning into a more disability focused bathroom very easily and very cheaply. So we've got some really great solutions that will be coming out in the very near future, which will allow that transition to go from something that is easy to use for everybody, but can have very specific needs as well that can be satisfied. But yeah, we're all about that kind of uniqueness and our differentiation in the marketplace. So we know that there's stuff out there that is really great, that kind of suits what we're trying to do. But we also know that there's some really great big opportunities there elsewhere in the home. So for example, the kitchen is a place that we haven't really thought about. There's also telecare and how we interact and how customers interact with telecare. Our initial ideas and concepts were very much based upon the telecare solutions, the pendant alarms, the warden call systems. They just scream vulnerability and, kind of big red buttons and stuff people would never wear in a million years, regardless of your age. And we kind of applied that to the aids and adaptation. So I think there's a big digital challenge there, but I think we're a little bit off that. I think we need to make sure that we're delivering and be true to ourselves and our core competencies and what we've already delivered. But there is opportunities to delve in other solutions and other marketplaces.
Just to finish up, really, going back to your journey on this, which is 2 years old, you made that jump, both of you. How much have you relied upon each other? Because making that jump on your own is difficult, I would imagine. And, I speak to quite a few designers that have made the jump on their own. Michael on the Tosh Show a couple of episodes ago was saying that, for the first 6 months, he kept questioning, oh my God, have I made the right decision? Because I've got a family to look after. I've still got bills to pay. I've still got things to do, but I've made that jump. How much have you bounced off each other and supported each other? Has that been an essential part of your journey?
I think that rings true, a lot of what you said there, Tony, to be fair. I think there is that kind of 6 month look back. Have I done the right thing? But I think myself and Laura have really got the passion. I hope this comes through in the conversation that we've had. We've always kind of known confidently, quietly, that there's something in this and we want to stick it out and see it through to the end. We've been told by numerous individuals that, this might not work. This isn't going to be very good. Show me this, show me that. We've had so many setbacks that we've been resilient through. And you have to work in a team to do that. I couldn't imagine doing it without Laura, to be honest. It would be a very lonely place and something that probably we wouldn't be having this conversation right now if we were to go it solo. But we've always had the kind of confidence to take it forward because we know we've done the research, we've sat there, we've created the concept, we've created the product, we've done the marketing. We know that there's something in that. We would have always seen this through to the very end. And it goes back to the original points at the start of the conversation around having passion and belief and not necessarily focusing on, is it worth my while in terms of income? It might be much more rewarding and a bit less pay, for example, but just go with it. Just go with your passion. Just go with what you want to do and what you think's right. But absolutely, it would be a very lonely place if it was a solo endeavor.
there's people that you'll always bump into them that give you 15 reasons why something won't work rather than giving you 2 or 3 positives around what you're doing. You know, design dementors, if you like, you know, they just suck the life out of everything that you put at them. So, Laura, how have you coped with that? Because you must have come up with that with the communication side of things. There are going to be people that will want to bang it back all the time and knock it down. How have you coped with that?
Yeah, there's been a lot of challenges. And I think the one thing that I go back to all the time is the kind of reason why we're doing this, the people that are going to benefit at the end of this. And that's kind of what's kept me going and what's kind of kept me, you know, getting up for work every day when it is really challenging, because seeing the kind of happiness and the benefit and the impact that installing these products for people just makes it all worthwhile. So, you know, the video that we shared of Sheila finally getting her products, you know, that really touched people. That really did, you know, strike a chord with people, because the pure joy that she got from having the old clinical ones taken away and her home kind of turning back from a hospital into a haven for her was huge. And I think that's kind of why we do what we do, that, you know, as hard as everything is, that's the reason that we created Invisible Creations, is to change lives, to make lives better, to make a real difference. So yeah, it can be challenging, but I think at its core, if you're doing something that you really believe in and that's going to make a difference, then it does make the hard days that little bit more bearable.
And a very last question, which I ask all the guests on there. I think you both sort of answered this, so I don't feel the need to repeat it. But, you know, if you were going back to school to advise students about how to find their career of the future, what one bit of advice would you be giving them with the hindsight that you've got now?
Probably for me, don't be afraid to fail. Actually, I've learned way more from any single failures that I've had than any of my successes. So don't take that as a kind of point of weakness or a sticking point or a barrier. Actually take the learning from that, because you'll be 10 times stronger and 10 times more successful by learning from that failure than actually taking it as something to kind of stop on.
There's no such thing as failure, just learning opportunities. That's all they are. Paul?
I think for me, find your passion and be ambitious. So those two, you will go far with those 2 values. If you love what you do and you want to make a difference and it's for the right reasons, and if you're ambitious with it and you want to go far and take it as far as possible, that will serve you really well. And don't worry about the failures, just crack on, be resilient, and you never know where you might find yourself. You might find yourself at number 10 Downing Street.
And you never thought you'd be knocking on that door, did you?
Absolutely not.
Paul, Laura, thank you so much for the time that you've taken today. I really appreciate it. And it's a message that hopefully will help an awful lot of teachers to connect kids with their passion and what they want to do in life and help them to push on and do it. So really do appreciate it. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks so much to both Paul and Laura. The company again is Invisible Creations. Have a look at their website. They're doing some amazing stuff there. I really enjoyed that conversation. I hope you did too, and I hope there's something there that you can bring back to school, bring back to students, which will inspire and motivate them in order to push on, in order to do the things that they feel is right. If you enjoyed that conversation, if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe. Our subscription list is growing all the time, but we want to keep pushing at that. We want to reach this bigger audience. Also, please, if you did like it, take a moment, just write us a quick review. It really makes a difference. And thank you so much. So until the next time, from Design for Life, thank you. Take care.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. If you did, hit the subscribe button now, as we have guests lined up for future pods that will inform, inspire, and entertain. This podcast is brought to you by the Design and Technology Association.